Hey guys, it's Melanie. Welcome to my channel. Today I have my top 20 of 2020, so stay tuned. So in 2020, I read 230 books, and of those 230 books, I had 51 5 stars. So narrowing those 51 5 stars into my top 20 and trying to put them in an order was surprisingly difficult. But what was really surprising was once I had come up with my list, well, my list surprised me because I expected it to be mostly like YA. But in the end, my list does have a lot of YA, but it also consists of 2 anthologies, 2 graphic novels, 3 nonfictions, 4 middle grades, and a classic. And that really surprised me. I wasn't expecting all of that. So that's 12 that are not just YA novels, which means less than half of my top 20 is YA, or YA novels, I should say, because one of the anthologies is YA. Anyway, let me just get into the list and I'll tell you a little about each of these books. So starting with number 20, I picked Straw into Gold, Fairy Tales Respun by Hilary McKay, illustrated by Sarah Gibb. And this is like a middle grade anthology, and it's fairy tale retellings, except that the original fairy tales are included in these fairy tales. So like, for example, Hansel and Gretel's story is kind of told in a way where it's Gretel's report to her teacher, and it's her teacher like reading these reports, and it's what she did over the holidays and why Hansel no longer fits in his coat. Things like that. I absolutely loved it. I love retellings. I love how this was done. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, this is my number 20. This next one is one that Xander is super tickled with making onto my list. And that is The K by Theodore Taylor. This is Xander's favorite book. And it's a little short thing. I read it pretty much in like one sitting. It's only 137 pages, but it packs a lot in this little book, and I cried. And I was shook by this book, and Xander was like, see, I told you. This follows a boy named Philip who him and his mother are on a ship to go back to the US, and this is during World War II, and their ship gets bombed, and he finds himself adrift on this lifeboat with just him, a cat, and one of the crewmen named Timothy, who is like West Indian, and they have to survive, and they end up on this K, this little island, and try to make do until somebody can hopefully rescue them, and they are there for a long time. And during well, in this explosion, Philip loses his eyesight, and so he's also not just trying to survive, but deal with the fact that he's now blind. This was really good. I highly recommend it. Now on to number 18 on my list. We have our first YA here, and that is The Hearts We Sold by Emily Lloyd Jones. This is set in a world where these things, people assume they're demons, are willing to make deals for body parts. They grant wishes for body parts. And our main character, she makes a deal with one for her heart. And her, as well as this group of heartless, they're all tasked with doing the bidding for this demon for 1 year, and then they get their heart back. And she makes this deal so that she has the money that she needs to pay for school, so she can stay in this boarding school that she really likes, and she doesn't have to be home with her family. And there's this also whole other dimension thing where they're having to like go and try to close these portals or openings into this other dimension before other bad things get through. And the only ones that can do this are heartless. And so this is why this demon has collected these heartless to do this. This book was really surprising to me, like how emotional it made me. It was so good. For number 17 on the list, I decided to go with a nonfiction, and this was The Other Westmore, One Name, Two Fates by Westmore. And this is about two men named Westmore. They grew up very close to each other in, I think, Washington, D.C. area. And they both grew up in the same kind of household with the same kind of background. They're both black men and similar neighborhoods and all of that, except one grows up to be, let's see, what does he become? A Rhodes Scholar, decorated veteran, White House fellow, and business leader, while the other ended up a convicted murderer serving a life sentence. And this is told where, like, kind of back and forth between the two different Westmores. And the Rhodes Scholar Westmore, he happens to see in the same newspaper that he's won his award. There's also this article of another Westmore who's been sent to prison for murder. And it's something that sticks in his head for a long time, and eventually he goes and he meets this other Westmore. And this book is their stories and how they're similar up to a certain point, and like what choices they each made to lead them in the directions that they went. And the Rhodes Scholar Westmore, one of the big turning points in his life was this military school that he went to. And I was reading this with Xander, and this encouraged him to want to be an ROTC in high school, and it has done wonders for him. And I'm so happy that we read this and it encouraged him. And I like that it made him more conscious of the choices that he's making, and he's wanting to make the right choices. And this book holds a special place for me because of that. Actually, when I said those 8 were all YA, I'm wrong, because one of those 8 was actually an adult, and that is number 16, which is The Wives by Taryn Fisher. This book is just like, why? I mean, so it's about a man who has multiple wives, and these wives know that there are other wives, but they don't like interact with each other or anything. They don't know anything about the other wives, except for that he's with each of these 3 wives on certain days of the week and kind of rotates between them, and he has his separate life with each of them. And one day, one of the wives, she finds a receipt which leads her to finding out about one of the other wives, and she goes and like tries to befriend this other wife and learn something about her. And this other wife reveals that her husband beats her, and this one's like, what? Because it's her husband too, and she knows that that's not her husband, so she's trying to figure out what's going on with all of this. And yeah, it was really interesting, and there are a lot of twists and turns that will just leave your brain like, huh? So that's why this made it to number 16 on my list. Number 15 is actually a middle grade graphic novel, and this one made it on my list because of all of the nostalgic feels, and that is The Babysitters Club, Christie's Great Idea. This is the first book in the new graphic novel series, and it's super stinking cute. I really like the artwork, and The Babysitters Club is like the book series that I think really got me obsessed with reading. And my starter subscription boxes too, because I had like a monthly thing where I got Babysitter Club books each month. I ended up with the entire series, the entire collection, all of the bonus books, everything. I absolutely 100% love this series, and reading this graphic novel it brought all of those feelings and those memories back, and I adored this. Now on to number 14 on my list. This was one of the most recent books that I've actually read, and this was something that I read with Marty, and that was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This was so freaking good. It follows Alina Starkov, who is an orphan, and her best friend Mal, who's also an orphan in the same orphanage. They grow up and go into the military. They're part of the First Army, and she is a cartographer and he is a tracker. She's pretty much been in love with him forever, and he sees them as just friends. And then one day it's revealed that she has a special ability. She is a Grisha, and she is then taken away to the palace to train with the Darkling to kind of understand her abilities and become part of the Second Army, which are made up of Grishas. This was so good and so entertaining, and we started reading it so that we could watch the show when that comes out, and I can't wait to continue with this series, and I cannot wait to watch the show. It's gonna be really good. Number 13 on my list. I couldn't have a top 20 anything without including at least one Cassandra Clare book, and for this one I decided to go with Ghosts of the Shadow Market because, and this is my other anthology, it is told in short stories, but there is like an underlying theme that follows the whole thing, and that is Jim trying to come up with the cure for being a silent brother pretty much, and his ailments, so that he can be normal, I guess, and be able to be with Tessa again. And this is so good, and I really enjoyed it. Also, there's a story in here that's set in Chattanooga, which I thought was so cool. So this is my Cassandra Clare book that made it to my top 20. Okay, so y'all know I love me some like retellings and fairy tale retellings and all of that, and so I'm not surprised that I think there's a few of those that have made it onto this list, and one of those is my number 12, which is Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim. This is like Mulan meets Project Runway meets Aladdin. Yeah. So our main character, Maya, her father receives a letter that he's supposed to go, or send the oldest son to go to be in this competition to be a tailor for the emperor, and she goes in his place because her brothers aren't able, and her father is not in the best health, so she goes in his place and does the whole chopping off her hair, goes as a boy because only men can be this, and the competition is set up very much like Project Runway, whereas each round there's a winner, and this winner gets rewards, and then the biggest loser or whatever gets sent home. And it gets down to where she is tasked with, oh gosh, see if I can remember this, making these 3 impossible dresses out of very impossible materials. There's like, see if I can find it. Okay, it doesn't say in that. It's like Tears of the Moon, The Laughter of the Sun, and something of the Stars. Blood of the Stars, I think it was. And she has to go on this quest in order to find these materials. And there's a character in here who very much gives me like Aladdin genie vibes, and that's where the Aladdin part comes in. I love this, and I definitely recommend it, and I can't wait to continue the series. Number 11 on my list is another nonfiction. It's actually a reference book, and I tabbed the heck out of this book. I read this, I believe it was before COVID, and I was planning this whole big trip around Europe. I was gonna bounce around Europe for a month and a half over the summer, and well, that didn't happen because of COVID. But this book inspired me for a lot of things and helped me come up with ideas for what I wanted to do and ways to save money and all of that. And that is How to Travel the World on $50 a Day, Travel Cheaper, Longer, Smarter by Matt Kepnes. And this book was just fabulous. And if you look, like, you can see all of my tabs throughout, like there was a lot of helpful stuff in this book, and I will eventually be able to use this information once I can finally travel. But this is my number 11. Okay, now for my top 10. Oh my goodness. So in the 10th place, I have, it's another middle grade. It's also another retelling, and that is The Land of Stories, The Wishing Spell by Chris Colfer. This was so much fun. So our main characters, it's their, I think, 12th birthday, and their grandmother gives them this fairy tale storybook that they've grown up with. And this is after having their dad of passing away, and it was just them with their mom, and their mom's like really depressed. And well, there's something special about this book, and they find themselves, well, falling into the book and into all these fairy tales, and they get to meet all these characters that they've grown up with, like knowing the stories of, but then you get to see other sides of these characters, and it makes them more human. And we also like find out about the Red Queen, or the Evil Queen, and I really liked her story a lot. And throughout the book, they are trying to collect these items to do this wishing spell so that they can get back home. And it was amazing, and I cannot wait to read more of this. Katniss wants to be part of my top 20. You're in my top 20 cats. Okay, number 9 on the list, we have another thriller. Actually, this is another adult, so I guess there was only 6 YAs. That is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is another thriller that's gonna leave you like, huh? When you're reading it. It follows a woman who shoots her husband like 5 times, I think, in the face. Yeah, and then she never speaks another word. And there's this therapist, like psychologist, who wants to take her case, and he's trying to help her work through all this or get to the bottom of it. And this, yeah, there's things in here that I'm just like, what? It was so good, and I definitely recommend this. Number 8 on my list is actually, I think this one's middle grade as well. So my stats at the beginning are so wrong, because there's apparently only 6 YA, there's 2 adults, there I think were 5 middle grades instead of 4. Yeah. Anyway, this next one was, it's actually a companion to another like series, I believe. And I haven't read this series. I thought this was a standalone, and it can be read as a standalone. But this book, oh my goodness, it hurt my heart so much, and I feel myself tearing up just thinking about this book, and it's been so long since I read it. Whew. It's about this girl. It's called Runaway by Wendelin Van Dronen, and it's not a long book. It's only like 245 pages, but there's so much heart in this book. This book gets me so emotional even talking about it now. Oh my goodness. So it follows our main character, who is, I forget how old she is. She's just a kid. I want to say like maybe 10 years old, something like that. And she's gone from foster home to foster home to foster home, and she's had a lot of bad ones. And finally she decides that she's going to run away. And she's like on the east side of the US when this happens, and she's decided that she's going to run away to LA. And it follows her travels and her struggles throughout her journey. And the whole thing's told like in journal entries by her, and she talks about things that had happened to her and in the past and the struggles that she's having currently. And it was so moving. Oh my goodness. And I remember when I read this, I was like bawling into the vlog because this book, I definitely recommend it. Okay, now that I've collected myself a little bit, let's continue on with the list. Number 7, we have another middle grade, and this one is quite the opposite. It is super, super creepy. Like, I haven't read another middle grade that is this creepy, or even many like YA or adult books that have creeped me out as much as this book. And that is Whispering Pines by Heidi Lang and Katie Bartowski. This is so creepy. And the last like 100 pages or so, like, you can't stop reading at that. You have to keep reading until you finish. And then I finished this book and I was just like, this is the beginning of a series. And I need to know how it ends. When reading this, I was just like, I knew I couldn't go to sleep until I finished it, because otherwise I would probably have nightmares. But it follows a girl named Ray whose father has disappeared, and most people believe that he just kind of ran off with somebody, but she doesn't believe that was the case. And her family ups and moves, and then they move to this place called Whispering Pines, where it's supposed to be this quiet little town. And she meets a boy across the street named Caden, who most kids seem to be frightened of because they believe that he was somehow involved in his brother's disappearance. Now, there have been several kids in this neighborhood who have disappeared, and they all come back different, and they don't have eyes. That's the big thing. They come back and they have no eyes, and they have faced some great terrors. And Caden, his brother, is like the only one who didn't come back. And Caden believes he knows what's causing these children to disappear and to come back having their eyes stolen. And nobody really believes him. And Ray knows what it feels like for nobody to believe them like they did with her father. And so she tries to help him, and it's just super, super spooky. And I definitely recommend it. It came out in September of 2020. I think the next book comes out in like September of 2021, I believe. I'm dying to know what happens next. Okay, so number 6 on my list is Rage and Ruin by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is part of the Harbinger series. Storm and Fury is actually the first one. I reread Storm and Fury in 2020, and it was also 5 stars, and then Rage and Ruin was a sequel. So I kind of lumped these two together as my number 6. I can't really tell you anything about this one though, because it is a sequel. But Storm and Fury, it follows a girl named Trinity, and she lives with this group of wardens. And wardens are like gargoyles come to life, and they protect the world from demons. So humans don't have to know anything about demons. And it definitely has like Shadowhunter vibes to it, which is, I love that. And then Trinity, she also has this ability where she can see ghosts and talk to ghosts. Also, Trinity is dealing with this degenerative eye disease, which is causing her to go blind. And that is something that the author, Jennifer L. Armentrout, also suffers from. And it was so moving. Like, this one just, oh, it made me cry. And I just really enjoyed rereading this and continuing. So I place this as my number 6 on the list. Okay, so now we are getting to the real cream of the crop, my top 5. In my top 5, I have a graphic novel, I have a nonfiction, I have a classic, I have 2 YAs, and both of them are a retelling in a way. So at number 5, we have the Back to the Future graphic novels. I picked just the first one. This was Untold Tales and Alternate Timelines. This whole series, I gave every single one of them 5 stars. They're all amazing. They don't change the Back to the Future story at all. They just add to it, and it just kind of fills in blanks, like any questions that people might have had about, oh, what happened during this time in the series, in the movies. They filled in those little gaps. Like, the very first story is when Marty met Emmett. So it's how, like, Marty McFly and Dr. Emmett Brown met in the first place and became friends, because you don't see that in the movie. The next story is about how Doc Brown got into working on the Manhattan Project prior to any of this, which kind of led to the whole time machine thing. And it's things like that throughout the entire series. And like, one of them was about the uncle that was always in jail that never managed to get out, things like that. And I absolutely loved it. I love the movie series, and this was just so much fun. And it was written by the people that did the movie, so they got it right. Okay, number 4 on my list is my nonfiction, and that is Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. This is big questions from tiny mortals about death. And yeah, it sounds morbid, and it kind of is a little bit, but it was so incredibly interesting, and it wasn't done in a gross, gruesome kind of way, but it just answered so many interesting questions, like, did mummies stink when they were wrapped? Can I be buried in the same grave as my hamster? Can someone donate blood after they die? Do bodies in the cemetery make the water we drink taste bad? Will my hair keep growing in my coffin after I'm buried? Can we give grandma a Viking funeral? Things like that. And there's also cute art. As funny as that sounds, there's cute art. And I really, really loved it. It caught my attention by the title, and I went into it not expecting much, and I just devoured this book. I really, really enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend it. Number 3 on my list is a classic, and that is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This book is so wholesome, and I believe everybody should read this book at least once in their life. It follows the March sisters, and it's almost like a slice of life kind of thing. Like, it follows them throughout their lives and coming of age, and it teaches so many different morals and how to be a good daughter and a good wife and a good sister, and, you know, how to be a gentleman even. It's just so wholesome, and I loved it. Okay, so now we're down to my top 2, and these were really, really hard, because I had 2 that I was just like, I love them both so much. And how do you decide? They're both kind of retellings in their own way, and they're both part of a series. And I think it came down to which one just had me freaking out the most. They both had me freaking out, but one had me freaking out a little bit more than the other. So in the number 2 spot, I put A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Bridget Kimmer. This is the second book in the A Curse So Dark and Lonely series. These books are so good. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. I can't really tell you too much about A Heart So Fierce and Broken because it is the second in the series, but this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It follows our main character, Harper. She has cerebral palsy. She lives in Washington, D.C. Her dad was into some shady business and he has passed away, and now her brother's kind of stuck making up for the things that their father did. And their mother is very ill. She's like deathbed ill. And Harper's out with her brother being a lookout for him while he's having to do a job. And Harper hears a commotion. She sees this man trying to take this, what looks like very drunk or drugged woman, and carry her off somewhere. And Harper tries to save the girl and tries to knock the guy out. They get into a fight. And the next thing Harper knows, she is in some like medieval castle, and she is no longer in DC. She is in this fairy tale world called Emberfall. And the man that has kidnapped her is a man named Gray, who is like the commander for the royal army. And the king, Ren, he's the king now. He was just a prince, but he ended up killing his entire family when he became a beast. And he was cursed by this enchantress to become this beast. And during his time as a beast, he slaughtered his family. He killed most of the people in the castle. He's hurt several of the people in his villages. And he hates it. He doesn't want to be this beast. He wants to be just human. And the way that he can break this curse is for one of these girls to fall in love with him. So Gray goes to this other world, Washington, D.C., and gets a girl and brings her back. And Ren tries to get her to fall in love with him. But each season, eventually he becomes this beast, and the girl gets scared off, or sometimes she dies. And this season's reset, and he goes back to being a human, and they have to start all over. And so this is their last season, his last chance at redemption, his last chance at love. And if he doesn't get cured, then he will permanently stay a beast and become the pet of this enchantress. And this book is so freaking good, and I gave this one 5 stars when I read it. And then I read A Heart So Fierce and Broken, and it blew my mind away, and it's even better than this one. And this follows Gray's story, and oh, Gray is my book boyfriend. I love Gray. But I cannot recommend this series enough. And then my number 1 book that I read in 2020. So technically, the book that was my number 1 isn't actually out yet. It comes out in February of 2021. But I was lucky enough to get an e-arc of it, and I was able to read it. My number 1 book for 2020 was Payback by Kristen Simmons. That is the 3rd and final book in the Vale Hall series, which is a little bit of a retelling of Nordic mythology and Valhalla and all of that. The first book is The Deceivers. The second book is Scammed. I also read both of these twice in 2020. The Deceivers was 4 stars, Scammed was 5 stars, and Payback is definitely 5 stars. This follows a group of characters. They are in a very private boarding school that has just like 20 students in it, and it is a boarding school for con artists. and their director, he's a bit of a vigilante who likes to collect secrets on people in power and tries to get rid of corrupt politicians and things like that. But things aren't always like they seem, and when you're in a school full of con artists, who can you really trust? And it was amazing. I really enjoyed this one. This one was even better. And Payback, it just broke me. Like, oh my gosh, if you watched that vlog where I read that, or if you watched the live show that we did with Kristen Simmons, you know that that book was just like a freaking roller coaster. Like, oh my goodness. The twists and turns left me dizzy. It was incredible, and I highly, 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 highly recommend this series. #1 for sure. So have you guys read any of these books? Did you like them? Did you not? Comment down below and let me know. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a big thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, click that subscribe button down below. And until next time, remember to always be completely you. Bye!